Welcome to our webinar, Emotional Medicine Permanently Heals Autoimmune Disease. I'm Josie, and I am so glad you are here. Today, you're going to be hearing groundbreaking information of how to permanently heal your autoimmune disease and how we do it here at a New Life Center by using emotional medicine. Now, before we get into autoimmune diseases, I want to share a little bit more about our background. Our company, A New Life Center, was founded by David Cope in Denver, Colorado. After a frustrating experience with both Western and alternative medicine over 20 years ago, David had a deep awareness that the onset of his autoimmune diseases following a divorce were due to his emotional state, created by the stress of his divorce. He realized this because prior to the event of his divorce, he was a healthy person and had no autoimmune diseases. So, with this awareness, he created a novel approach to resolving his emotional state. And as he predicted, his body returned to normal functioning and his autoimmune diseases permanently healed. He began using his emotional healing approach with others struggling with autoimmune diseases here in the Denver area, and they all began to permanently heal as well. Now, he's still in contact with many of these early participants, and it's been over 18 years, and they are still healthy and without their autoimmune diseases or symptoms, which is how he knows, and we know here, that what we teach is true healing of autoimmune diseases. And I was one of these individuals. I met David 10 years ago when I was 28 years old. And at that point, I was at my complete rock bottom in my life, but most importantly, my health. I had 8 autoimmune diseases like lupus, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, Raynaud's, eczema, CVID, and most importantly, at that point, the last autoimmune disease I got was MS, multiple sclerosis, and I didn't know where to turn. I was only eating 5 foods because I was allergic to all others. I was taking all kinds of supplements and doing all kinds of tinctures and treatments, also doing plasma infusions. And I was seeing my Western medicine doctors as well. I had gotten so sick that I was also unable to work, and I didn't know where to turn. Why was my body breaking down? Now, prior to that, this all really started when I was 15 years old. That's when my first autoimmune disease kicked off. And what happened right before that? My dad passed away. 6 months after my dad passed away, and this will be important because we're going to be talking about stressors such as grief and loss today and how they cause autoimmune disease. 6 months after my dad passed away, I developed rheumatoid arthritis. And after that, it seemed about every year or two, I was developing a new autoimmune disease. And it wasn't like I was a completely healthy person before that. I had a history as a child of allergies, strep, and sinus infections, and had my appendix taken out. But it was after that first autoimmune disease that my health really started to unravel. In the following years, I developed other chronic conditions such as anxiety and depression, ADD, and eating disorder, and other autoimmune, like I shared, such as Hashimoto's and lupus, a lot of severe food allergies too. And I went down all these kinds of alternative, Western, and functional avenues. Everyone said that what they did could help me, but all I found is that I kept getting worse and I kept getting more autoimmune diseases. Also, I started a career as a licensed therapist because I knew that there was an emotional component to this. I just couldn't figure it out. The grief of my dad it just lingered inside of me, and that anxiety and depression are things I lived with every day. I became a licensed therapist, worked at the Betty Ford Center, worked at a grief and loss center, but found no resolution in that field to my own emotional upheaval. And again, my body kept unraveling. So back to 28, that's when I met David. I had a practitioner that told me that he helped people that doctors had no solutions for. And at that point, that was me. And David helped me understand that the real problem was my emotional state, and that it was my emotional state that was actually causing my autoimmune diseases and was keeping me from healing. I took his educational program, and in 3 months, almost all of my autoimmune diseases and symptoms were permanently gone. And by the 6 month point, everything was gone. I am 10 years completely healed. I am not in remission. I test negative for all autoimmune diseases that I had. I don't have to take any medication. I take no supplements. I eat no special food diets. I'm completely healthy. I've experienced true healing. That is what we're going to be talking about today. It is the journey I now take my students on because after I healed, I knew I had to take others down this route as well. And that's what we'll be talking about in this webinar because autoimmune diseases are at an epidemic rate. And here at a New Life Center, we are at the forefront of this epidemic. 10% of the worldwide population has an autoimmune disease. They are growing at a rate of 12 to 19% a year with no end in sight. 80% of autoimmune diseases happening to women. And now adolescents are at the highest rise that we've ever seen. And the thing that is the most problematic is that Western alternative and functional medicine don't even understand the fundamental nature of what an autoimmune disease is, what the singular root cause is. And if they don't know this, how can they ever help us heal? So, first, we're going to explore what is an autoimmune disease. An autoimmune disease is a disease in which the body's immune system becomes dysregulated and mistakenly attacks the very tissues and organs it was designed to protect. So, this is an important definition. We're going to keep coming back to it throughout this webinar. Right here, this definition clearly defines the root cause of autoimmune diseases. For all autoimmune diseases, the root cause is the dysregulated immune system. Period. It's a dysregulated immune system attacking different tissues or organs. What this definition also tells us is what autoimmune diseases are not. We now can know just with this definition that autoimmune diseases are not coming from the Epstein-Barr virus or environmental toxins, genetics, or the foods that we eat. Again, other avenues that I looked into before I came here. The singular root cause of autoimmune diseases is the dysregulated immune system. All autoimmune diseases are chronic diseases. The term chronic diseases means that that disease has no known cure and is a lifelong condition. Now, in order to really heal from autoimmune disease, again, which are chronic diseases, we have to understand that we have never known what true healing really is and how to facilitate it. We have always relied on outside interventions, most commonly medication, supplements, or restrictive food diets and meditation to heal us. We have never realized that the human body is capable to heal and self-repair naturally without the need for outside interventions. Again, the human body is capable to heal and self-repair naturally without the need for outside interventions. Next, we're going to explore true healing versus symptom management. True healing is the activation of the body's natural ability to heal and self-repair without external intervention, so that the disease is permanently eliminated and the person is healthy again. True healing recognizes that all humans are biologically identical, that we have the same biology at a very fundamental level, and true healing believes that there thus should be one singular treatment for us to heal. True healing is universal. Again, it works for every individual, regardless of the biological dysfunction created by the disease. So in the case of autoimmune diseases, true healing works for everyone, regardless of the tissue or organ being attacked, or the diagnosis, again, of that autoimmune disease, because we are all biologically the same. The body gets dysregulated for the exact same reason and heals in the same way. True healing does not differentiate by diagnosis or by the individual's biological dysfunction. Again, this is truly a one size fits all approach to healing. It is universal because we are all biologically identical. And true healing does not require separate treatments for each diagnosis or a patient centered approach. We know here that the singular problem for autoimmune, it's that dysregulated immune system. Again, we all have the same human body. The reason that we got our illnesses, it's coming from that same place. The treatment thus should be the same. So true healing is one treatment method for all with an autoimmune disease, and it doesn't need an individualized, specialized, patient-centered approach. Therefore, lab testing is unnecessary with true healing because the individual nature of the levels of a person with a condition are irrelevant when it comes to true healing. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room with autoimmune disease healing. This is the stark truth about autoimmune disease healing modalities. There is no modality in Western, alternative, or functional medicine that can permanently heal an autoimmune disease. Every modality available for autoimmune diseases are symptom management. Symptom management is treating the symptoms rather than the root cause of a condition. And so in the case of autoimmune diseases, what that is doing, it is treating the symptoms such as the leaky gut, inflammation, fatigue, hair loss, food allergies, instead of the root cause, which is the dysregulated immune system. Now, why are Western alternative and functional medicine symptom management? Before we explore that, let me give a reminder of what an autoimmune disease is. An autoimmune disease is a disease in which the body's immune system becomes dysregulated and mistakenly attacks the very tissues and organs it was designed to protect. Western functional and alternative medicine are symptom management for autoimmune diseases because what they are not doing is treating the singular root cause, the dysregulated immune system. The singular root cause of all autoimmune diseases is the dysregulated immune system. Now, every modality for autoimmune diseases is symptom management. And here are some common symptom management for autoimmune diseases. Now, in Western medicine, they're using prescription medication. And in alternative and functional medicine, common symptom management techniques are supplements, restrictive food diets, cleanses, homeopathy, restoring gut microbiome, red light therapy, meditation, and Reiki. Again, they are addressing the symptoms instead of the root cause, the dysregulated immune system. Now, the dysregulated immune system is the only thing that should be addressed in order to achieve true healing of autoimmune diseases. And here's the problem with symptom management. The techniques are lifelong. They're ever changing. And that individual with an autoimmune disease is dependent on them for the temporary alleviation of their symptoms. And when an individual with an autoimmune disease ceases their symptom management, the signs and the symptoms of their disease return. This is how we know that it's not true healing. Now, the best that can ever be achieved with symptom management is remission, which is very rare. Remission is the temporary reduction of the signs and symptoms of the disease. Remission means the individual still has their condition. They are not permanently healed, and their remission is dependent on their symptom management routine. Now, we are doing the best out here with what we have, but if we want to permanently heal from autoimmune diseases, we have to really understand symptom management and instead use a method that will re regulate the immune system. Again, the singular root cause of autoimmune disease. Now, let's revisit that definition of autoimmune disease: a disease in which the body's immune system becomes dysregulated, mistakenly attacking the very tissues and organs it was designed to protect. The root cause of all autoimmune diseases is the dysregulated immune system. To permanently heal autoimmune diseases, the only treatment needed is to re regulate the immune system. This leads us to the real question with autoimmune disease: what dysregulates the immune system? And the answer: our emotional state. The paradigm shift: psychology heals autoimmune disease, not medicine. Next, let's go into emotional medicine. Emotional medicine is the process that allows the body to heal and self repair naturally without external intervention by working on an individual's emotional state. This natural healing is permanent and occurs without the need for that medication, lab work, supplements, food diets, or integrative practices. Remember, true healing is the activation of the body's natural ability to heal and self repair without external intervention, so that the disease is permanently eliminated and that person is healthy again. Emotional medicine believes it is our emotional state that creates the dysregulation of the immune system that causes autoimmune diseases. And here at A New Life Center, we know this to be true because when we re regulate the immune system here by addressing an individual's emotional state, all autoimmune diseases and their symptoms permanently heal at the same time, regardless of the diagnosis. That's right, they all heal and they heal at the same time. This is how we know this is true healing, and the real root cause of autoimmune is our emotional state. And this was my experience. I had 8 autoimmune diseases and a whole host of symptoms coming from those autoimmune diseases. When I worked on my emotional state, my immune system re regulated, and all 8 of my autoimmune diseases and all of my symptoms permanently healed. And the healing all happened together again at the same time. Now, let's go into what emotional medicine is not. Emotional medicine is not meditation. It is not mindfulness. It is not yoga, and it is not psychotherapy. Now, while helpful in other contexts, we find these practices are not a solution for autoimmune diseases because what we find is that these practices temporarily suppress the emotional state of the individual instead of resolving it. And remember, it's that emotional state that is causing autoimmune diseases. It's causing the dysregulated immune system. So suppressing our emotional state isn't a solution. And thus, these practices are not a solution to healing autoimmune diseases. And just another reminder, remember, it is our emotional state. That's the real issue. Now, let's go into the how. How does the emotional state dysregulate the immune system? Well, the answer lies in emotional stress and its impact on the autonomic nervous system. Stress and the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. The real question here is how our emotional state creates our stress. And from here on forth, I'm going to be using our and we language because this was me as well. This was my experience. And those of us who develop an autoimmune disease, we come from that same fabric, that same background. We have the same experience emotionally that led up to our autoimmune diseases. So, individuals like myself who developed an autoimmune disease, the problem is that we have lived our life with an unhealthy internal emotional state, which means that we are easily overwhelmed and incapable of handling the emotional challenges of life. Now, I know when I was younger, I was just told that I was much more highly sensitive, which is a really nicer way of just saying I was much more easily overwhelmed and incapable of handling the challenges because, again, I had an unhealthy internal emotional state. And it's this unhealthy internal emotional state that we have that creates the lens, like glasses, that we see and perceive our world through. So, as a result, the common challenges of life, both big and small, also known as stressors, they're interpreted through our lens, through our glasses, and are perceived as highly emotionally overwhelming, also known as stressful. Now, our experience of stress comes from us. Our experience of stress comes from us. To better understand this, I'm going to give you an example I call it the flying on an airplane example. Because up until I came here to a New Life Center, I really thought that my stress was coming from the things, the people, the circumstances, my past, my parents, my upbringing. I thought it was coming from the world around me. I had no idea that my experience of stress was actually coming from within me. Now, back to the flying on the airplane. I want you to imagine an airplane and put yourself into that airplane, sit in one of those seats, and I want you to look around. And we're going to explore the different kinds of individuals and the varying stress responses they can all have to the exact same stimuli flying on an airplane. Now, some of you might even know a person. I have a friend who has such a high stress response to airplane rides that she doesn't fly at all. She wouldn't even be on that airplane. Her emotional stress is so high. Now, you also might know someone like my grandmother who very high emotional stress response from flying on an airplane. So she takes medication to help her with that experience. You also might see someone like myself on that airplane who I have a little bit of a stress response in the beginning when the takeoff and the turbulence, and I kind of ease in as we ease into that flight. So, I'd say a medium to low stress response. And then you're also going to know or see people like my sister, who I say is more comfortable in the air than she is on land. And she has an almost non existent stress response to flying on an airplane to the point that she's already sleeping before the flight takes off and will continue sleeping even through all of the turbulence. Now, let's take a moment and step back and really think about this. If stress was coming from outside of us, then everyone would have the same stress response to the same stimuli, that airplane flight. But no, as humans, we all have varying degrees of different responses of stress. So, what is that telling us? Is that stress truly does come from us. It's how we interpret the airplane ride through our internal emotional state, right? Either healthy or unhealthy, that determines our stress experience. Remember, our internal emotional state is the lens we see everything through and thus determines our stress experience. Stress comes from us. This is a good thing because it means that we are in control of our stress and thus we can change our stress experience. This is key to healing an autoimmune disease, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, let's explore the connection between emotional stress and the creation of autoimmune diseases. Here at a New Life Center, we have found that there is always a major life stressor that creates an autoimmune disease. As I had shared, mine was the death of my dad when I was 15. And 6 months later, I developed rheumatoid arthritis. Now, again, here are the most common major life stressors that we find create autoimmune disease, and this is particularly true for women. Starting high school or graduating university, getting married, getting pregnant and having a child, losing a loved one, especially a close loved one, like a spouse, a child, a mother, or a father. Now, why do major life stressors like the ones I shared create autoimmune disease? Well, as women, and remember, 80% of autoimmune diseases happen to women. As women, we suppress our emotional stress. We suppress our emotional stress because we are pain avoiders, whereas men are naturally problem solvers. Men solve their problems and are not living generally with ongoing stress. But as women, we don't deal with our problems, also known as stressors. We suppress the emotional pain of life. Now, why do we do this? Well, we live life suppressing our emotional stress because while highly emotionally overwhelmed by life, we are as women, the problem is that we not only are pain avoiders, but we want our life to be like line, a straight line, easy, in control at all times, no challenges known. And we all know that that's not the real nature of life. There's always challenges and unforeseen stressors and loss down the road. And we don't want to deal with this because we're a pain avoider. So we suppress all the emotional pain. And what happens? It doesn't go away. I didn't know when I started suppressing my emotional pain because I wanted my life to be like a straight line that suppressed emotional stress didn't just disappear. What happens is it grows and builds inside our physical body. And as women, we end up living with a pressure cooker of suppressed emotional stress inside of us. This internal emotional pressure cooker continues to grow and build and eventually gets set off by a major life stressor, like the ones I just shared, dysregulating the immune system and creating an autoimmune disease. Next, let's learn how major life stressors dysregulate the immune system. And now we're going to be moving into the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic nervous system is part of the autonomic nervous system, and it's responsible for our fight or flight mechanism. And the problem here is that the sympathetic nervous system activates the fight or flight mechanism. Now, that fight or flight mechanism is set off by a major life stressor. Again, commonly the ones I shared. And that fight or flight perceives our high emotional stress as an actual physical threat and becomes activated. Now, I like to say that the fight or flight mechanism is incredibly crucial, but it's not an intelligent response. It can't tell the difference between an emotional threat, a high emotional threat, and a high physical threat. And again, gets set off by that major life stressor that we go through, becomes activated. And here's the thing, the fight or flight mechanism, it's only supposed to be on, it's designed to be on for up to 2 hours and then go back to the parasympathetic nervous system and turn off. But unfortunately, because of the ongoing major life stressor, such as a divorce, death, or birth of a child, the fight or flight mechanism becomes chronically activated and it stays locked on. The chronic activation of the fight or flight mechanism here is key to the development of an autoimmune disease. The chronic activation of the fight or flight mechanism due to our ongoing emotional stress causes the body and the immune system to dysregulate. Now, let's explore what that looks like in the physical body. So, stuck in the sympathetic nervous system in chronic fight or flight, cortisol and other stress hormones flood the body. And what that looks like is it dysregulates our hormones and it dysregulates our metabolism. Most of us, especially as women, we have dysregulated female hormones when we have an autoimmune disease, and we struggle with our metabolism, either losing too much weight or most commonly gaining weight and not being able to lose it. This is why. Most important here to note is that in chronic fight or flight activation, the immune system dysregulates. Remember, dysregulated immune system, root cause of autoimmune disease. That dysregulated immune system then begins attacking a tissue or an organ and thus creating an autoimmune disease. Right here, we now know how autoimmune diseases are created. Again, all going back to our emotional stress. So, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, one of the autoimmune diseases I had, it's an immune attack on the thyroid gland. Celiac is an attack on the lining of the small intestine. And multiple sclerosis is an immune attack on that myelin sheath. Also, the digestive system is compromised. And what happens is symptoms are created, such as the leaky gut, dysbiosis, which is dysregulated gut microbiome, candida, and food allergies. Now, I want to take a moment right here because it's common thought, especially in the alternative and functional communities, that the leaky gut is the root cause of autoimmune disease. But if we can see clearly here, the leaky gut is not the root cause. The leaky gut is a symptom of the body stuck in a chronic fight or flight activation. That's why, for me, when I was working on my leaky gut through the years with all kinds of probiotics and prebiotics and cleanses, nothing ever permanently healed my gut because I was stuck again in that sympathetic nervous system in fight or flight. So, working on the leaky gut, will not provide true healing for autoimmune diseases. Now, to summarize what we just learned, autoimmune diseases and all symptoms are created by emotional stress chronically activating the fight or flight mechanism, causing the immune system to dysregulate so that it attacks healthy tissue or organ. And here's the problem. In the sympathetic nervous system with fight or flight chronically activated, we might be able to get into remission with symptom management if we're lucky, but our body can never permanently heal. The body can never permanently heal autoimmune diseases while continuing to stay in the sympathetic nervous system in chronic fight or flight. And unfortunately, again, stuck there, we will continue to have our autoimmune diseases for the rest of our lives. If I wouldn't have come here and experienced true healing, I would still be doing my symptom management, all my supplements, my food diets, my medications, and my cleanses, and I would still be stuck in a sympathetic and chronic fight or flight with no way out, no way of permanent healing, going around truly in circles, and would have to keep that up, symptom management for my symptoms for the rest of my life, all the while still having all of my autoimmune diseases. So, what we need to do to heal autoimmune, the question is how to turn off the chronically activated fight or flight mechanism. That's the problem here. That's why we're unable to heal and move back to the parasympathetic nervous system where true healing occurs and we permanently heal autoimmune disease. So, in order to permanently heal an autoimmune disease, again, we have to turn off that chronic fight or flight and get out of the sympathetic nervous system and re enter the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the nervous system where autoimmune diseases experience true healing. It's a nervous system we are born in, and it's where the body and the immune system naturally re regulate and regain homeostasis. So, translation, what that means is the immune system stops attacking that tissue or organ, goes back to normal, and autoimmune disease heals. So, to make this healing process happen, to get out of chronic fight or flight, we have to resolve our high emotional stress so that fight or flight no longer perceives us as being under an ongoing threat and finally turns off. This is the crux, this is the key for true healing of autoimmune disease. Now, remember the airplane flight example that I shared earlier? That stress comes from us in our perceptive lens and is actually something we are in control of? Well, this is the psychology of healing. How do we downregulate our stress so chronic fight or flight turns off and we can heal? How do we resolve our high emotional stress? Well, we need to learn how to emotionally handle the stressors of life. Now, this is where psychology comes in. And this is how psychology heals autoimmune disease, not medicine. By learning how to emotionally handle life stressors, we as individuals with autoimmune disease take away the overwhelm we feel in life. Remember, the real problem is that we, individuals with autoimmune, don't know how to emotionally handle life and perceive life as highly emotionally overwhelming. We need to learn how to emotionally handle life, and we learn how through the psychological concept called locus of control. Now, locus of control is a very well established psychological concept. It was taught extensively in my graduate degree for psychology, and it's a concept developed by Julian Rotter in 1954. And locus of control means place or location of control for an individual. And there's either two options we can live from. An individual can either have an external locus of control, which means external, their place of control in their life is outside of them, or an individual can live life with an internal locus of control, meaning the place of control for that individual is within them, inside of them. And just a note here, we can't switch back and forth, back and forth. An individual is either one or the other. And people who get an autoimmune disease, like myself, what unknowingly has happened is we have lived our life unknowingly with an external locus of control. Now, an external locus of control means my emotional state is controlled by outside forces. What happens in my life and my emotional response is not in my control. Now, what this looks like in practice, and I can speak from this from my own experience, when I lived with an external locus of control, I felt that the way I experienced life and my emotional state and the challenges that I had were because of the people in my life, my past, my parents, what had happened to me. Like I shared my dad's death, that all of these hard challenges were what made me, in a negative way, who I was. They gave me the burden of my life, that gave me the burden of my health. And I felt very out of control or not in control of where my life was going and what was happening to me. External locus of control creates a highly emotionally stressful experience of life because it feels like we are in the passenger seat of the car of our life and that someone else is driving, whether that be our parents, our upbringing, a past relationship, our work, our kids, our husband. We don't feel in control at a deep level. And it's a very disempowering experience of life. As you can imagine, living life like that day to day, it creates a very high emotional stress. Again, that's why people who have an autoimmune disease, this is the locus of control they live from. Now, people who don't have an autoimmune disease, or when they experience true healing, what they shift to is an internal locus of control, which is my emotional state is controlled by me. What happens in my life and my emotional response is in my control. Now, internal locus of control creates a healthy emotional state. It's really the opposite of external locus of control because what it allows us to do is realize that we are in control of our emotional experience and we are in control of our health. That we realize with an internal locus of control, instead of focusing on all the things around us as the problem, we realize that those are the things we can't control. We realize that the only thing we can control in our life truly is ourselves. So while we can't control what happens in our life or what happens to us in terms of stress, what we do solely have control over is us and our response. And it's how we choose to respond to the stressors and events and circumstances of our life that determines our emotional state. If I respond in an unhealthy way, well, that's going to create inside of me an unhealthy emotional state. If I choose to respond to life stressors in a healthy way, that is going to create a healthy internal emotional state. It's a wonderful place to live from because it's a driver's seat perspective. It's an empowering place. We are solidly planted in the car of our life, and it is our choices of response to life that drive the car. And so it's a complete opposite experience from external locus of control. An internal locus of control creates, again, a healthy emotional state. It down regulates how we feel in a positive way. So, by making the psychological shift from an external to an internal locus of control, and this is important, chronic fight or flight turns off. So, by making that psychological shift to an internal locus of control, and then being in control of our emotional state, being in control of our responses to life, we learn how to emotionally handle the stressors of life. And what happens when we learn how to emotionally handle the stress? Well, our emotional stress, understandably, downregulates. And that fight or flight mechanism finally realizes and recognizes that we are no longer living in a state of emotional threat and turns off. Finally, now with fight or flight finally off, the body moves out of the sympathetic nervous system and back to the parasympathetic nervous system. True healing occurs at this point. The body naturally heals and self repairs in the parasympathetic nervous system, permanently healing autoimmune diseases. In the parasympathetic nervous system, each autoimmune disease and all symptoms naturally and permanently heal at the same time without the need for supplements, food diets, or medication. And they all heal at the same time. This is true healing. And what this looks like in the body, like out of the sympathetic and chronic fight or flight and back to the parasympathetic, cortisol and other stress hormones return to normal levels. And it naturally re regulates our hormones and our metabolism stabilizes. So over time, our weight goes back to normal level, and those hormones again go back to normal naturally as well. I was someone who my hormones were so dysregulated, I didn't have a period for a menstrual cycle for about 9 years. And again, when I got back to the parasympathetic nervous system, my menstrual cycle returned, my hormones were regulated, my weight stabilized. Now, most important in this is that the immune system re regulates. Remember, the sole problem with an autoimmune disease is the dysregulated immune system. When the immune system naturally re regulates, it stops attacking tissues and organs, and there's no longer an autoimmune disease. So, back to those early examples, the immune system for Hashimoto's thyroiditis, it stops attacking the thyroid, no Hashimoto's. For celiac, the immune system stops attacking the lining of the small intestine, hence no celiac disease. Or most importantly for MS, that immune system stops attacking the myelin sheath. Thus, there is no MS, there is no autoimmune disease when that immune attack ceases. And the digestive system returns to normal functioning. The gut heals naturally all on its own without the need for any kind of supplements. The microbiome also naturally regulates and all allergies resolve. I am someone, like I shared, had a very leaky gut, a very dysregulated digestive system, had candida, had severe food allergies, so many issues. And all of it healed at the same time naturally. All I had to do was work on my emotional state, get back to an internal locus of control. Now, if you're curious of how you or a loved one can experience true healing of autoimmune diseases, turning off that chronically activated fight or flight mechanism and move from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic without the need for any external intervention like medication, supplements, food diets, well, and permanently heal their autoimmune disease. What we offer here at a New Life Center, again, over 18 years, is our Beyond Remission programs. And this is the same program that I took over 10 years ago, only much more refined. And what we have is the Autoimmune Healing Program. Now, the Autoimmune Healing Program is a 13-week online, self guided educational course. Again, because the real issue here that's dysregulating the immune system, it's our emotional state. And what we need to do is learn how to emotionally handle the stressors of life. Have a perspective shift that will move us from an external to an internal locus of control. And the beautiful thing is, even though we're not natural at life and stress, we learn how. And this course is what teaches it. Now, everything we do here is again is based on 18 years of true healing and of permanent healing. Individuals who come here into our program come in as students, not patients or clients. They are students, and what we do is we watch educational videos each week, and there's weekly homework that's applying that groundbreaking life concept each week to our own lived experience, and it makes it real and true. And this is facilitating the healing process that's happening behind the scenes, again, out of the sympathetic back to the parasympathetic. And that is what happens and where a body naturally heals itself, as I just shared. Now, in terms of time commitment, I always say that this program works in the background in a positive way. We work with very busy individuals, and this program each week is a different module. And again, there's 13 weeks. It should be about 2 to 4 hours of coursework each week, and that includes watching the videos and doing the homework. It's a very doable course. And again, we as students are learning how to emotionally handle life. It's a beautiful thing. Life starts making sense, really, for the first time. Now, I also want to share that we have a chronic illness healing program. And the chronic illness healing program is for chronic illnesses such as chronic pain, anxiety, depression, migraines, fibromyalgia, and sleep apnea, just to name a few. And that's for an individual who does not have an autoimmune disease, has chronic illness. Side note here, know that many people like myself who have autoimmune diseases also have chronic illnesses as well. The secret I'll share with you today, these are actually the exact same program. So don't worry. If you have an autoimmune disease, the autoimmune healing program is for you. If you have a chronic illness, the chronic illness healing program is for you. And just know that your condition and all associated symptoms will permanently heal. And it's the same, exact same format as that autoimmune healing program. Well, next, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for sticking with me today, to being here for this webinar, and giving me the opportunity to present our work and our understanding of autoimmune diseases. As I shared this work that I taught today, emotional medicine, has completely changed, saved, and transformed my life. It is my passion to let individuals in the world know that true healing is possible, that as humans, the human body possesses the natural ability to heal and self-repair all on its own. We just need to learn how, and we do that through the education of emotional medicine. And if you're out there and you're curious about our courses, either the autoimmune healing program or the chronic illness healing program for you or a loved one, please know that there is a link down below in the description to schedule a complimentary course consultation. You'll have a link to apply for a complimentary course consultation with me. And please know I am here, and I look forward to meeting you and to you experiencing true healing as well. Thank you so much.